Welcome to questions to the Prime Minister. I will call the Prime Minister to answer the engagement's questions. Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Forgive me, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday was International Nurses' Day, and I know that the whole House would want to thank the nurses and also the care staff and key workers for their tireless work in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, sadly, 144 NHS workers and 131 social care workers' deaths have been reported as involving COVID-19. Our thoughts are with their families and friends. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, this House learnt of the tragic death of Vladimir Putin. The fact that she was abused for doing her job is utterly appalling. My thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of the whole House, are with her family. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
We now go across to Ruth Edwards. Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Green investments generated the highest returns in the recovery from the 2008 financial crisis. As we restart our economy, will my right honourable friend commit to prioritising investment in low-carbon infrastructure, such as the electric vehicle charge point network and renewable energy production, which will also help the UK meet its net zero target by 2050?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and to encourage the take-up of electric vehicles, we are putting a further £1 billion into EV infrastructure across the country to prevent range anxiety for those who use EVs.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in thanking our nurses and all those on the front line and send my condolences to all of the families of those that have died of coronavirus, including Vladimir Putin, as the Prime Minister referenced, a ticket officer who we learnt this week had died from COVID-19 in awful circumstances. Mr. Speaker, in his speech on Sunday, the Prime Minister said that we need to rapidly reverse the awful epidemic in our care homes. But earlier this year, and until the 12th of March, the government's own official advice was, and I'm quoting from it, "It remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected." Yesterday's ONS figures showed that at least 40% of all deaths from COVID-19 were in care homes. Does the Prime Minister accept that the government was too slow to protect people in care homes?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't true that the advice said that, and actually we brought the lockdown in care homes ahead of the general lockdown, and what we've seen is a concerted action plan to tackle what has unquestionably been an appalling epidemic in care homes, and a huge exercise in testing is going on. A further £600 million I can announce today for infection control in care homes. And yes, it is absolutely true that the number of casualties has been too high, but I can tell the House, as I told the Honourable Gentleman, Right Honourable Gentleman, last week and indeed this week, the number of outbreaks is down and the number of fatalities in care homes is now well down. There is much more to do, but we are making progress, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised the Prime Minister queries the advice of his own government up to the 12th of March. I do, of course, welcome any fall in the recorded numbers, and he's right to reference that. But the Prime Minister must still recognise the numbers are still very high. The Daily Telegraph this week carried the following quote from a cardiologist. "We discharged known, suspected and unknown cases into care homes which were unprepared, with no formal warning that patients were infected, no testing available and no PPE to prevent transmission. We actively seeded this into the very population that was most vulnerable." Does the Prime Minister accept that the cardiologist is right about this?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have the utmost respect for all our medical profession who are doing an extraordinary job in very difficult circumstances. But what I can tell the House is that actually the number of discharges from hospitals into care homes went down in March and April, and we had a system of testing people going into care homes, and that testing is now being ramped up across all the 15,000 care homes in this country.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I want to probe the figures the Prime Minister's given us a little bit further. The ONS records the average number of deaths in care homes each month. For the last 5 years, the average for April has been just over 8,000. This year, the number of deaths in care homes for April was a staggering 26,000. That's 3 times the average, 18,000 additional deaths this April. Using the government's figures, only 8,000 are recorded as COVID deaths. That leaves 10,000 additional and unexplained care home deaths this April. Now, I know the government must have looked into this. So can the Prime Minister give us the government's views on these unexplained deaths?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, coronavirus is an appalling disease which afflicts some groups far more than others. I think the whole country understands, and in particular the elderly. And he's right to draw attention, as I've said, to the tragedy that has been taking place in care homes. The Office of National Statistics is responsible for producing the data that they have. The government has also produced data which not only shows that there has been, as I say, a terrible epidemic in care homes, but since the since the Care Homes Action Plan began, we are seeing an appreciable and substantial reduction, not just in the number of outbreaks, but also in the number of deaths. And I want to stress to the House and also to the country that solving the problem in care homes is going to be absolutely critical. Getting the R down, not just in care homes, but across the country, is going to be absolutely critical to our ability to move forward as a nation with the stepped programme that I announced on Sunday. We must fix it, and we will.
Starmer.
The Prime Minister says that solving the problem in care homes is crucial, but that can only happen if the numbers are understood. And therefore I was disappointed that the Prime Minister doesn't have an answer to the pretty obvious question as to what are those 10,000 unexplained deaths. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the overall figures given by the government at the press conference for those that have died from COVID-19 was 32,692, each one a tragedy. For many weeks, the government has compared the UK number against other countries. Last week, I showed the Prime Minister his own slide, showing that the UK now has the highest death total in Europe and second highest in the world. A version of this slide has been shown at the number 10 press conference every day since the 30th of March. That's 7 weeks. Yesterday, the government stopped publishing the international comparison and the slide is gone. Why?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as he knows very well, the UK has been going through an unprecedented, once-in-a-century epidemic, and he seeks to make comparisons with other countries which I'm advised are premature, because the correct and final way of making these comparisons will be when we have all the excess death totals for all the relevant countries. We do not yet have that data. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to try to pretend to the House that the figures, when they are finally confirmed, are anything other than stark and deeply, deeply horrifying. This has been an appalling epidemic. What I can tell the House is that we are getting those numbers down. The numbers of deaths are coming down. The numbers of hospital admissions are coming down. Thanks to the hard work of the British people in reducing the R, Mr. Speaker, and reducing those numbers of fatalities, we are now in a position to make some small, modest steps to begin to come out of some of the very restrictive measures that we've had. I think people do understand what we're trying to do as a country. And as for the international comparisons that he seeks to draw now, I think he will have to contain his impatience.
Keir Starmer.
Well, I'm baffled. It's not me seeking to draw the comparisons. These are the government slides that have been used for 7 weeks to reassure the public. And the problem with the Prime Minister's answer is it's pretty obvious that for 7 weeks, when we weren't the highest number in Europe, they were used for comparison purposes. As soon as we hit that an enviable place, they've been dropped. And last week, he quoted in defence Professor Spiegel-Halter. What Professor Spiegel-Halter said at the weekend was this, and we need to think about it. We should use other countries to try and learn why our numbers are so high. And so dropping the comparisons means dropping the learning, and that's the real risk. I want to ask the Prime Minister now about the changes that come into effect today. A real concern for many people is childcare. I want to quote a mother of a young child. I apologise that it's a little lengthy, but it reflects the queries that all members of this House will have been getting. She says this: as Boris said in his speech, people are encouraged to go back to work, meaning my partner, as he works in construction. My partner has explained to his boss this can't happen because we've got no childcare. He also rang the nursery, but they're not open. I work as well, but my boss is having none of it. I hope I can get some advice. Me and my partner have been so stressed all day. What advice would the Prime Minister give her?
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just on his earlier point about not learning from other countries, nothing could be further from the truth. We are watching intently what is happening in other countries, and it is very notable that in some other countries where relaxations have been introduced, there is the signs of the R going up again. And that's a very clear warning to us not to proceed too fast or too reckless. And I hope that I hope the country does understand that. On the specific point that he rightly raises about people's anxieties about going back to work when they don't have adequate childcare, I think I was very clear both with him and with the House earlier in the week that insofar as people may not be able to go back to work because they don't have the childcare that they need, then their employers must be understanding. And it is clearly, as I said, an impediment. It's a barrier to your ability to go back to work if you don't have childcare. I'd be very happy to look at the specific case that he raises if there's anything more that we can do to shed light on the matter.
Keir Starmer.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for indicating he'll look into that particular case. It's one, I think, of very many. The Prime Minister is asking the country to support decisions that will affect millions of lives. These are not easy decisions, I recognise that. They're very difficult, balanced decisions that the Prime Minister and the Government has to make. After the confusion of the last few days, gaining public confidence in them is crucial. Crucial. The Prime Minister says his decisions were, and I quote, driven by the science, the data and public health. So to give the public confidence in the decisions, can the Prime Minister commit to publishing the scientific advice that the decisions were based on?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all sage advice is published in due course, as the right honourable gentleman knows. And let me be absolutely clear with the House that SAGE has been involved in every stage and our scientists and our medical officers have been involved in every stage of preparing this strategy. And I want to remind the House that what we are doing is entirely conditional and provisional. The UK has made a huge amount of progress. The people of this country have worked incredibly hard to get the R down. We cannot now go back to square one. We can't risk a second outbreak, and we will do everything to avoid that. I think that actually when they look at what we're advocating as the way forward, the stepped process that we have set out, I think people can see exactly what we're trying to do as a country, and they can see that everybody is still required to obey the social distancing laws, the social distancing rules. And the common sense of the British people got us through that first phase of this disease. I'm absolutely confident they will get us through the next as well.
We're going across to Ludlow to Philip Dunn. Philip Dunn.
My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is well aware of the impact of air pollution on health outcomes, particularly affecting those with respiratory diseases like COVID-19. Will he therefore reaffirm his commitment to tackling global emissions and the COP26 Global Climate Conference to help protect our people and our planet in future?
Minister.
Yes, and I thank my right honourable friend for what he does to champion the environment and the cause of reducing CO2 emissions. Alas, we've had to postpone the COP26 summit that was to have taken place, as he knows, in Glasgow at the end of this year. But our enthusiasm, our determination to get to net zero by 2050 remains undiminished.
We now go across to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I begin by thanking all our nurses for their efforts in keeping us safe and looking after us, and applaud yesterday as the International Nurses' Day. Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister, in response to my questioning, noted the ability of the governments of all four nations to come together and to deliver a very clear message for our people. Events on Sunday could not have been more disastrous from this government. The Prime Minister has made confusion costly, devolved administration shut out, widespread confusion amongst the public, and a total disregard from this government for workers' safety. Many, sadly, have seen the images of London buses being packed this morning. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister accept that the clear message in Scotland is stay home to protect the NHS to save lives?
Prime Minister.
And Mr. Speaker, indeed, the message throughout the country is, of course, that you should stay at home if you can, and unless the specific circumstances that we've outlined apply. But I must say, I don't accept the characterisation of the cooperation that we've had across all four nations that the Leader of the SNP makes. In my experience, and it's been intense, it's been going on for days and days and weeks, and actually I think if you look at the totality of the measures that we're taking as a country, there is much more that unites us than divides us, and we will go forward together.
Go back across to Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the Prime Minister has failed to deliver a clear message, and he didn't address the point about London buses being packed this morning. The Prime Minister is threatening progress made against the spread of this virus by the general public, who are following the advice to stay at home. The Prime Minister is putting workers' safety at risk by calling on those who can't work at home to go to their jobs without any guidance on health and safety. Only last Monday, the Health Secretary launched a test trace app trial. On Sunday, the Prime Minister appeared to leapfrog any success with that by announcing easing of restrictions. Before any lockdown easing, and to avoid undermining the progress made so far, the Prime Minister must make sure that there are sufficient levels of testing available and the ability to test, trace, isolate is fully in operation. Why is the Prime Minister throwing weeks of progress against this virus into jeopardy, undermining the work of our outstanding NHS?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he raises a point about London buses, which is quite right, and I don't want to see crowding on mass transit, public transport in our capital or anywhere else, and we're working very actively with TfL to ensure that what we do is we have more capacity, we discourage people from going to work during the peak, and that the operators, in particular TfL, lay on particularly more tube trains when those are necessary throughout the day, and a huge amount of work is being done. We also want to see proper marshalling at stations to prevent crowding of trains. I must say that on his point about test, track and trace, test, track and trace is going to be a huge operation for this entire country, and I think actually he should pay tribute to the work of all those hundreds of thousands of people who are now responsible massively for escalating our test, track and tracing operation. We now test, I think, more than virtually any other country in Europe, and and the rate of acceleration, the rate of increase has been very, very sharp indeed, and we will go up to 200,000 by the end of the month. But he's absolutely right that this should be entirely, the success of this programme is absolutely vital if we're to be able to move on to the third step, to the second and third steps of our roadmap.
We now go over to Yorkshire to Julian Smith. Julian Smith.
Mr. Speaker, over 5,000 rough sleepers, 90% of the homeless population in the UK, are now in temporary accommodation as a result of action taken by the government at the start of this crisis. Will the Prime Minister commit to providing all funds necessary and all action needed to ensure that this positive dealing with the homelessness crisis can be made permanent and each of these individuals can be given a long-term home?
Minister.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, and as he knows, it is this government's ambition to end rough sleeping by 2024, and it's great to see the progress that has been made even in this very, very difficult time. As he says, 90% of rough sleepers are now in accommodation or have been offered accommodation, Mr. Speaker, and we will be investing considerable sums to make sure that we build the housing and we address the social issues that tackle that problem for good.
We go over to Sir Edward Davies. Sir Edward Davies.
Can I thank the government for listening to representations from the Liberal Democrats and others to protect jobs by extending the furlough scheme yesterday? But will the government now do the same for the self-employed? People like cleaners, childminders, taxi drivers and hairdressers have all seen their incomes devastated and are only now able to apply for help for the past 3 months. But millions of these families now have no help in the future. So surely self-employed people must have their support extended too.
Minister.
I admire the honourable, the right honourable gentleman. Brilliant attempt to take the credit from my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, for his extension of the coronavirus job retention scheme, which I do believe has been one of the most extraordinary features of this country's, our collective response to the crisis. We are looking after. He's right to draw attention to the position of the self-employed. We are making sure that they do get payments over 3 months of up to £7,500 as well.
We go down to Wales to Dr. Jamie Wallace. Dr. Jamie Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate the Prime Minister on being straight with the British people and spelling out a clear and cautious roadmap to lift the lockdown measures in England. Unfortunately, for my constituents in Bridgend, the Welsh Government has not set out any such plan or vision. Does he agree with me that the people of Wales deserve a government that is honest and clear with them about the road ahead?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend very much, and I will agree with him that, but whatever the defects of the Labour government in Wales, my experience is that actually we've been working very well together across all 4 nations. We'll continue to do so, and my honest view is all those who talk about confusion or mixed messages are grossly overstating the position. The common sense of the British people is shining through this argument. They can see where we want to go. They can see where we need to go.
We go to John Speller. John Speller.
Prime Minister, at the end of March, I asked you to help the thousands of our people stranded abroad, notably in South Asia and especially in the Punjab. Grudgingly and much slower than other countries, the Foreign Office organised flights back, but there are many still stranded. Furthermore, the FCO now seems to be washing its hands of those with indefinite leave to remain, even though they may have lived and worked here for years and are husbands, wives, parents and grandparents of British citizens. Indeed, some have described this as another Windrush waiting to happen. So, Prime Minister, will you sort this out?
Minister.
I thank the right honourable gentleman. He actually nabbed me behind the Speaker's chair after he last put it to me. I can tell him that we estimate that 1.3 million British nationals have now been returned. I know he would like the RAF to be more involved, but I can also tell him that we've put in £75 million to a charter arrangement, and a whole range of airlines have signed up to it, and we are doing everything we can to bring people back as fast as we can.
Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the arrogant, incompetent and vindictive Electoral Commission suffered its final humiliation. For 4 long years, it has investigated and hounded 4 people from 4 different leave organisations, making their lives and their families' lives hell. Last week, the police said they were totally innocent and had done nothing wrong. Prime Minister, for the sake of democracy, will you ensure that that politically corrupt, totally biased and morally bankrupt quango is abolished?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I hear what my honourable friend says about the Electoral Commission. I think what I can say is that insofar as those who were investigated, I hope that all those who spent so much time and energy and effort drawing attention to their supposed guilt will now spend as much time and energy and ink and airtime drawing attention to their genuine innocence, Mr. Speaker.
Go across to David Linden, north of the border. David Linden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we moved into lockdown, some of Glasgow's vulnerable asylum seekers were moved from safe accommodation into city hotels where social distancing is harder to enforce. So it's clear that the Home Office is not currently doing enough to protect and look after those who seek refuge in our city. Will the Prime Minister urgently trigger a full Home Office review into the support being provided to asylum seekers and ensure that they work with key partners in the Council to make sure they're not left destitute once the lockdown is lifted?
Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman draws attention to a very, very important issue. We will make sure that nobody, let alone asylum seekers in this country, is ill-treated, and I will certainly be investigating the matter that he refers to. Be happy to write to him.
Down to Wales to Faye Jones. Faye Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week should have seen the beginning of the Hay on Wye Literary Festival, but as we are currently closed to visitors, Hay has shown true Welsh innovation by moving its festival online this year. Will the Prime Minister join me in thanking those tourist businesses who have acted in the national interest to protect public health and remind our visitors that once the Welsh Government publishes its exit plan, Brecon and Radnorshire will be able to welcome you back again very soon?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that the wonderful festival at Hay on Wye has had to be postponed this year. I thank my honourable friend for what she's doing to promote it, and I congratulate them, as she says, on their typical Welsh ingenuity in making it online, turning it into Hay on Wi-Fi, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker.
Stuart Hulsey, we go across. Stuart Hulsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Both COVID and Brexit is suppressing trade, damaging jobs and the economy. And while we hope as COVID ends, global trade will bounce back, there's no guarantee that will happen quickly. The Prime Minister, though, could mitigate some of this damage by seeking an extension to the Brexit transitional period. Can he explain to the House why he's being so negligent in not seeking that transitional extension now?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the most remarkable things about, as I said actually to the right honourable gentleman, one of the most remarkable things about this crisis has been the way the whole country has come together to deal with it. And there's been a spirit of unity and sharing that I don't think we've seen for a very, very long time. I think a lot of people in this country don't want to see the Brexit argument reopened. They want to see it settled. They want to see it done. And that's what this government intends to do.
Simon Baines, going across. Simon Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The hospitality and tourism businesses of my constituency of Clwyd South are vital for the health of its local economy, of which a very good example is the Llangollen Steam Railway. Would the Prime Minister join me in congratulating them on their current restructuring and fundraising campaign, designed to see them through the coronavirus crisis? And after the crisis is over, would he please hop on board one of their steam trains when he is next in Llangollen?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have a picture at home of myself and William Hague aboard the Llangollen Steam Railway, I'm proud to say, and I congratulate them on what they're doing to raise funds, and I've no doubt that they have a glorious future ahead with his support.
Go up to Neil Gray, north of the border. Neil Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a number of cases where employers are refusing to furlough staff, either because they do not understand or are unwilling to follow the guidance. 17-year-old Ben Edgar has now found himself without a job or furlough support and is being classed as ineligible for social security because of his age. The employer is refusing to engage with my correspondence. So for cases like this, will the Prime Minister consider a furlough appeals process to assist employees, ex-employees and employers to ensure people are treated fairly, according to the guidance, to save unnecessary redundancies or hardship?
Prime Minister.
I think he's making an excellent point. I'd be very happy, if he could send me details, we'll be very happy to take up the case that he describes.
We go to Kate Griffiths. Kate Griffiths.
Constituency of Newtoxeter and across the country, we've seen incredible dedication of our NHS workers in dealing with COVID-19, dedication that has tragically cost some their lives. Can I ask the Prime Minister what steps he's taking to ensure that the NHS are adhering to Public Health England calls to best BAME staff on the front line, and where possible to make appropriate arrangements to move them to non-patient facing roles?
Staff and NHS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend. I think I understood very clearly what she was saying. It's obvious from the data that coronavirus, as I said earlier on, is falling disproportionately on certain groups, not just the elderly. We need to examine exactly what is happening. We need to protect all the most vulnerable groups, and we will take steps to ensure that that NHS staff and others are properly protected and advised and screened.
Go down to Brighton with Caroline Lucas. Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, climate experts reported that green economic recovery packages deliver far higher returns than conventional stimulus spending. And they also warned that how we emerge from this coronavirus crisis mustn't be in a way that deepens the climate and nature emergencies. Does the Prime Minister agree? And will he commit to action that will help us to build back better, and start by committing that any airline queuing up for a taxpayer handout must be required to meet robust climate goals?
Prime Minister.
Well, I think probably the best and shortest answer I can give to her is that we totally understand that aviation, clearly, inadvertently, the planet this year will have greatly reduced its CO2 emissions. And she's absolutely right that we need to entrench those gains. I don't want us to see us going back to an era of the same type of emissions as we've had in the past. Aviation, like every other sector, must keep its carbon lower, and we're certainly working on technological solutions to ensure that we can do that.
We come to the final question. William Wragg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, join me in paying fulsome tribute to all the staff at Stepping Hill Hospital, particularly those caring for patients with COVID-19? But would he recognise that many people have not been attending hospital as usual? So how will he be assisting hospitals like Stepping Hill ensure that my constituents can access healthcare as usual?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's one of the most important features of the way this country, I thank my honourable friend, one of the most important features of the way this country responded to the epidemic, that we did protect the NHS. We maintained capacity in the NHS throughout. Nobody went without a ventilator. There was space in the ICUs throughout the crisis. But we have a situation now, as he rightly says, when too many people are not going to hospital or to the doctor to seek the treatment they need and deserve, and I would certainly encourage people with conditions that need medical treatment to go and get that treatment now, and that will help us to reduce deaths this year and throughout the crisis.
We now come to the urgent questions to the Secretary of State for Education. I call the Secretary of State, Gavin Williamson, to answer the urgent question from Leila Moran. As on the order paper, the Secretary of State should speak for no more than 3 minutes. Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to you for granting this urgent question. We're requested to make a statement this week, but members will understand there are restrictions on the number of statements. So I'm therefore grateful to the honourable member for the opportunity to answer questions today. It is over 7 weeks since we asked schools, colleges and childcare settings to close to all but vulnerable children and those of critical workers. This has been a huge ask of teachers and parents, but the greatest impact of all has fallen on children themselves. I'm immensely grateful for the response for all those working in education, childcare and children's social care. But we all know the best place for children to be educated and to learn is in school. And it's always been my intention to get more of them back there as soon as the scientific advice allows. As the Prime Minister confirmed, we are now past the peak of the virus, and he has set out a roadmap for the next phases of our recovery. If progress continues to be made, we expect that from the 1st of June at the earliest, we'll be able to begin a phased return to school, college and childcare for children in key transition years, alongside our priority groups. Primary schools will be asked to welcome back reception, Year 1 and Year 6 children in smaller class sizes. Nurseries and other early year providers, including childminders, will be able to begin welcoming back children of all ages. And secondary schools and colleges will be asked to provide face-to-face support for years 10 and 12, who are due to take key exams in the next year. On Monday, my department published initial guidance for settings on how to begin to prepare, and will work with the sector leaders to develop this further in the coming weeks. This guidance sets out protective measures to minimise the risk of infection, including restricting class sizes and limiting mixing between groups. Crucially, all children and staff will have access to testing if they develop symptoms of coronavirus. This will enable a track and trace approach to be taken to any confirmed cases. We continue to follow the best medical and scientific advice and believe that this phased return is the most sensible course of action to take. I know that this will be challenging, but I know that nursery, school and college staff will do everything in their power to start welcoming our children back to continue their education.
We now call Layla Moran, who is asked to speak for no more than 2 minutes. Layla Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need to get our children back to school at the earliest opportunity. Every day that schools remain shut, the disadvantage gap widens and vulnerable children risk falling through the cracks. However, we should only reopen schools when we know it's safe. Given we still don't know about transmissibility between children, can the Secretary of State reassure us that these decisions are based solely on public health? And to what extent has getting parents back to work been the main driver? And what of teacher safety? The Chief Medical Officer said that there still needs to be a debate on this. So does the Secretary of State not think it irresponsible to publish plans and suggest timetables without disclosing all scientific advice? And will he commit to publishing it today? And why weren't all major teaching unions consulted on the specifics of this decision to make sure it's workable? The guidance says that risk assessments should be carried out before schools open, and I welcome this. Will these be made public as with businesses? And when can we expect further guidance on travel? If a school leader decides it's not safe to reopen, will the Secretary of State respect that? And he also says that reasonable endeavours must be made to deliver the curriculum, but will he now set out his expectations, given how varied this has been between schools so far? And can he clarify what does some face-to-face contact for Year 10 and 12 actually mean? And will he guarantee that every child in all year groups who need access to devices or the internet will get it? And when will we know about future exams? Finally, it's obvious to anyone that children in reception in Year 1 can't socially distance. He says that the safety of children and staff is our utmost priority. So can the Secretary of State tell us, in plain English, what does he think safe actually means? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her questions, and I'm glad she recognises the importance and the need to make sure that children are getting their education back in schools at the earliest possible moment. When you have medical and scientific advice that is saying that it is the right time to start bringing schools back in a phased and controlled manner, it seems only the right thing to do and only the responsible thing to do for the many of the reasons that she herself highlighted. And in terms of pulling our guidance together, we've actually worked very closely with all of the teaching unions and the head teachers unions. We've worked very closely with the sector. Every week they have been having the opportunity to meet with them, and I've made sure that the time that my officials have made time in order to sit down with them, talk about their issues and concerns, and this is what has informed and developed the guidance that we have shared with schools. But in terms of the hierarchy of controls that we have developed, in terms of making sure that the risk of transmission of coronavirus is absolutely minimised within schools, we understand that the advice that we needed to seek was not within the Department for Education, but was within Public Health England, and also working with the scientific and medical advisors as every step of the way have been informing what the government does. And that is why when we created the hierarchy of controls about creating the safe bubbles for children and teachers and support staff to work in, this was informed by them. So why are we bringing schools back? The reason that we're bringing schools back is that we know that children benefit from being educated by their brilliant teachers in front of them. We recognise that children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds are the ones who are going to suffer the most if we do not bring schools back when we are able to do so. I'm more than happy to share all the advice that we have received from SAGE. SAGE regularly publish their advice, and when they're ready to do so, they'll be sharing that again. And we've also made sure that we've asked the scientific advisors to give briefings for the sector to make sure that they understand that the decisions that we are making to bring back children are based on the best interests of the children, including making sure that they do not miss out on something that is so precious, which is their education.
Now go across to Robert Halfon. Robert Halfon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly welcome the approach that the Secretary of State is taking in getting children back to school in a phased way. Could I ask him, given that we know that close to 90% of vulnerable children are not in education, and that figures from the Sutton Trust suggested that at least 50% of pupils have not communicated with their teachers in the first week of April, will my right honourable friend, whilst understanding schools won't officially be open in the summer, support instead the opening of summer schools over the holidays to be staffed by volunteers, graduates, an army of retired teachers to provide catch-up tuition to these children who have been left behind?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right about what we need to be doing in terms of everything we can help children who will not necessarily be having the benefit of returning to school before the summer holidays, but how we can support them, to give them that extra boost, to make sure that they're learning all the things that they want to do. And he's right to highlight the many volunteers, the many thousands of volunteers that want to reach out, help our children in order to be able to have the knowledge to succeed in the future. And we're very closely looking at such schemes, working with schools, working with the sector to how we can make that available to them. And I very much value my right honourable friend's advice and insights and thoughts on this, and we're very much looking at how we can mobilise that.
I now call Rebecca Long-Bailey, who is asked to speak for no more than 2 minutes. Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all desperately want schools to reopen for the sake of children's education and well-being. But the Secretary must appreciate that the guidance provided so far does not yet provide the clear assurances over safety that are needed. Shielding families anxious, worried grandparents and teaching staff in fear sadly sums up the theme of the last 48 hours. So to allay these concerns, I hope he can address the following issues today. Will the Secretary consider changing the focus of the plan so that instead of asking schools to scramble to implement an unrealistic plan by a specific date, we ask schools to plan to meet certain conditions that, when met, would signal it was safe to open, a subtle but very important distinction? Does he acknowledge that due to the availability of staff and space, splitting classes whilst simultaneously providing remote learning is incredibly difficult? And will he work with schools to develop a realistic plan for social distancing? Has he modelled the impact of reopening schools on the infection rate and will he publish it? Will he acknowledge that for younger year groups, social distancing will be virtually impossible, and that the current guidance sadly gives the impression that those pupils and staff should just accept being exposed? With this in mind, will he rethink the position on PPE? And finally, Mr. Speaker, most schools break up for summer in mid-July. If the ambition is to get pupils back for a month, that means the whole school would need to be back less than 2 weeks after the priority years. So how does the Secretary expect schools to implement social distancing for the whole school when many heads say this is just impossible? But if they don't, then what is the point of schools planning strict health and safety measures for 2 weeks only to abandon them? The Secretary repeatedly states that schools will only open when it's safe, and he referred to the scientific advice which requires a return in a controlled manner. I don't see much of a controlled manner at the moment, Mr. Speaker, so please can the Secretary work with the sector to get this right?
Secretary of State.
Of course, the Honourable Lady points out the importance of working with the sector, and that is what we'll do at every step of the way, and that is what we have been doing. And we recognise the importance of supporting them to make sure that as children return to school in a controlled and phased manner, that we offer them the maximum amount of support, and recognising that in every school is individual and unique, and how we support them and give them elements of flexibility in order to be able to make sure that the transition from just providing the education settings available for those who are vulnerable children and children of critical workers, and expanding this in the limited way that we're proposing will require some elements of flexibility that they will need within the sector, and we'll work with them to do that. But I have always been clear that we would give the sector as much notice as possible. And we have said that, if we are allowed, which it seems likely that we will be able to, we would like to see schools opening from the 1st of June, giving schools as much forward notice as possible in order for them to get ready. We think this is a responsible and sensible approach in terms of a phased return. I slightly fear that the Honourable Lady, if we were asking her to pin her down as to what would be the date, it would end up being as to what would be the year as against what would be the actual start date. But we do want to work with her. We do want to work with the whole sector to make sure that this is a phased, sensible and controlled return to schools, because the people who suffer the most from schools not being open are those children who are so desperate to attend.
We now go over to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. Sir Geoffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The guidance on returning of schools into the primary sector is very clear. Can I ask my right honourable friend to be very clear about the guidance for the secondary sector? For example, what does face-to-face support mean? Which year groups precisely will be able to return? Will it be a voluntary basis? And would he agree that we need to provide maximum support for those who are taking GCSE and A-level exams both this year and next year as well?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right of the importance to support those youngsters and children who are going to be facing GCSEs next year, as well as A-levels, BTECs and other qualifications in years 10 and 12. And we are working with the sector because what we want all children in those year groups is to have the opportunity to go into school, to speak with their teachers make an assessment of what learning and support that they need to have over the following weeks as we approach the summer holidays, but also making sure that they set the work at the right level, so through the summer holidays children can benefit from learning through those 6 weeks as well as those weeks as we approach the summer holidays. But it is important to get these transition years back into schools, even if it is for not a full-time timetable, but this is a first step in the right direction.
We now go to north of the border to Carol Monaghan, who is asked to speak for no more than 1 minute. Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welsh young children do seem to be less susceptible to COVID-19. Professor Graham Medley has told the Science and Technology Select Committee it is still not clear what the role of children is in transmission. So what new evidence does the Secretary of State have on the ability of children to transmit, and will he publish this? When the Scottish Government recently published detailed proposals for reopening of schools with a mixture of home and school learning, his colleague, the First Secretary of State, said this would cause hospitals to be overwhelmed. So why then is England considering this reckless full reopening of primary schools? And finally, if it is the ambition to bring all primary year groups back before the summer holidays with a maximum of 15 pupils per class, where are the extra teachers going to come from? As most schools don't have rooms lying empty, where are the additional classrooms coming from? And will he reassure teachers and school staff that they will not be expected to make or provide their own PPE?
Well, if I can take the opportunity to thank the Scottish Deputy First Minister for the close work and collaboration that we've had between ourselves over the last few months as we have had to deal with this pandemic right across the United Kingdom. I think that the Honourable Lady would be asking very searching questions of me if, when I'm given the scientific and medical advice that it is the right time to be opening up schools in a limited manner, that I wasn't taking up that opportunity. And quite understandably, SAGE does publish its advice. I have no doubt that it will be publishing the advice it has offered us in terms of what we're doing, and we would obviously be more than happy to make that as freely available as possible.
Tracy Crouch.
Mr. Speaker, can my right honourable friend not only confirm that our approach to reopening schools is very much in line with other European countries, but, Mr. Speaker, you might expect a former sports minister to ask this, I haven't seen much about how we can ensure that schools can conduct their PE duties. So will he be issuing specific guidance to ensure that schools can still put on PE classes, but in a safe way?
Secretary of State.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. The importance of PE for all children, whether they're at school or at home. And I think that we've been seeing some brilliant examples of children really being engaged in physical activity. We have issued some guidance in terms of how PE can be conducted, in terms of a safe use of equipment and non-contact sports at this initial stage. We're very keen to work with the sector to see how we engage all young people in as much physical activity as possible.
We go to Ian Mearns in the North East. Ian Mearns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know from the NAHT that head teachers have not been consulted about the proposed date of return. So when you say you're working with the sector, that is partially but not completely true. And also having 12 to 15 children socially distanced in a classroom is really largely unrealistic. We know children are more likely to be asymptomatic than adults if they contract COVID-19. So what public health medical evidence does the Secretary of State have that children will not spread the virus to other children, teachers, teaching assistants, cleaning and catering and caring staff when they return to schools? And will he publish that evidence?
Secretary of State.
So, as I've repeatedly said, and I'm not sure if the honourable gentleman was listening to my earlier responses, but we said that obviously SAGE does publish its evidence and the advice that we get. So, of course, that is in the public domain. But as every stage, every single week I've been meeting with union leaders as well as other sector leaders, whether that is Ofsted, whether that is the Confederation of Schools Trust, and I'll continue to do so. And we've shared our thinking very widely as to what we're hoping to do. We recognise this is a challenging situation for everyone, and there are lots of concerns, and we want to work with all organisations, whether they be representative bodies of schools or unions, in order to get the best guidance to the workforce, but also to children and parents as well.
Staying in the North East, Richard Holden. Richard Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The
vast majority of schools in North West Durham have remained open, looking after the most vulnerable children. Would the Secretary of State join me in thanking the staff in these schools for their selfless actions throughout the global coronavirus pandemic? But as we look to the future, can my right honourable friend reassure parents, teachers in the House that despite the claims of some that safety of pupils will be the government's top priority, can he confirm that in reaching this decision, is work closely with unions and school leaders, and also that any children going back to school will be fully eligible for testing and tracing, as teachers are already?
I'd very much like to join him in thanking those teachers and support staff who've done so much to keep schools open all the way through this period. And it's important to remember that schools have remained open all through this coronavirus pandemic. And my honourable friend raises an important point about testing. We already have priority testing for all teachers and those who work in schools if they have symptoms of coronavirus. This priority testing will be extended to all children who attend school and if they're displaying symptoms, as well as their families. We recognise how important test and trace is in terms of beating this pandemic.
We remain in the North East with Mary Kelly-Foy. Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, my thanks to all school staff in the City of Durham and across the country for their dedication throughout the pandemic. Education unions are clear. There can be no compromise on health and safety. These proposals are ill thought out and reckless. They will, at best, create a sterile learning environment for young children who won't understand why they're unable to interact with their friends. At worst, the proposals will set off a chain of new infections back into the households of working people. How can it be right that without any scientific evidence, school staff and their pupils have to accept lower safety standards than you'd expect queuing at test scores?
Secretary of State.
The only consideration behind this decision is what is in the best interest and for welfare of children and those who work in schools. And we all recognise the importance of children being able to return to schools. And sometimes scaremongering and making people fear is really unfair and not a welcome pressure that is to be placed on families, children and teachers alike.
We go to Damien Hines. Damien Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I commend this approach to minimise and mitigate the risk from this virus, while simultaneously recognising that as well as the educational harm, there are also significantly negative health and well-being effects for children the longer they're away from school. And can my right honourable friend assure me that within the clear guidelines, head teachers will also be afforded maximum flexibility to make this work for each school's unique circumstances?
Secretary of State.
My right honourable friend is absolutely correct. The impact on children isn't just an educational impact by them not being in school, but it's a health and welfare impact as well. And he is equally right in the sense that we need to make sure that schools have a flexibility in order to be able to work within these guidelines to make the proposals work for both staff and for children.
Go over to Lillian Greenwood. Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the government guidance for education and childcare settings, the section on what the latest science tells us states that children have less severe symptoms than adults and are less likely to become unwell if infected with coronavirus. Is there a danger that children could be infected but asymptomatic, be in school and pose a serious risk to the health and safety of school staff, other children and their families? I welcome his agreement to publish the scientific advice, but he must have heard loud and clear that heads and teachers and support staff and parents are really worried. How's he going to win their confidence that it is time for schools to reopen?
Secretary of State.
Well, every step that we take in terms of returning schools is at the heart of it is the safety, the security of those who are in that school, whether it is the child, whether it's a teacher, a teaching assistant or any other support staff. That is why we're doing it in a phased return. We're making sure that we take small steps forward, making sure that we minimise the risk to all those who are attending school and working within schools.
Go over to James Cartledge. James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome my right honourable friend's approach. Of course, Denmark reopened its primary schools on April 15th. It has not seen a huge surge in infection, and in fact, the country is moving to a new phase where they are reopening restaurants. Is my right honourable friend aware that yesterday the BBC spoke to Dr. Langer, who is the Vice President of the Danish Union of Teachers? She was very positive about their experience. And does he agree with me that therefore perhaps our own teaching unions should speak to their and engage with their Danish counterparts to learn from their experience, so that when we get to the beginning of June, we can reopen our schools both safely and successfully?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend raises an important point about where are the international benchmarks that we can look towards. And in reaching the conclusions as how to bring about a phased return to schools, understandably, we looked at countries such as Denmark and the Netherlands and many others as to how they'd done it. And what you'll see is a mirroring in approach as to what happened in Denmark as to what we are doing here in the United Kingdom. And I think that is the right approach, because what you've seen is that schools have started to return in Denmark, and you have not seen negative impact as a result of that. And I think this goes to reconfirm that our approach is the right approach. And I'd certainly hope that trade unions in this country would speak to trade unions in Denmark as well.
We go over to Stephen Doherty. Stephen Doherty.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Cardiff South and Penarth are repeatedly expressing frustration to me that the UK government press conferences and their briefing of the media does not make clear the distinction in policy on this between England and Wales, and that's causing confusion and anxiety. So will the Secretary of State therefore make clear for the UK media and for Welsh teachers and parents that he agrees the decision to reopen schools is for the Welsh Government, that schools won't reopen in Wales on the 1st of June, and that they rightly won't do so until it's safe for children and teachers?
Secretary of State.
I very much agree that this is a decision for the Welsh Government.
We now go over to Selene Saxby. Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How can my right honourable friend reassure nervous parents and staff that June the 1st is not too early for a phased return to school?
Secretary of State.
We would not have been making this decision to do a phased return to school if a scientific and medical advice had not been absolutely explicit that this is something in the right time to be able to sort of do this. But we have stated that the 1st of June is the earliest date. If the situation changes, if a scientific or medical advice changes, obviously we will change the programme of that phased return. But we want to give schools, as well as parents and children, the opportunity and time in order to adjust and get ready to return to school.
We go over to Brendan O'Hara. Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's recent promise that England's school would be COVID secure prompted Chris Whitty, his Chief Medical Officer, to say that there needs to be a proper debate about teacher safety as schools reopen. When will this proper debate take place, and what steps will be taken to ensure the safety of teachers and their pupils?
Secretary of State.
We recognise right from the start the importance of ensuring the safety of all those in schools, not just for children, but also those who are teaching and supporting the education of children. And that's why we put forward a whole set of guidance about how you minimise risk in terms of reduction, in terms of the number of children in that classroom, minimising contact between children, staggering in terms of times as to when schools will open. And I'll be very happy to share this with the Scottish Government in terms of our thinking. So when you're in a position where the Scottish Government wishes to return schools back into education, they can hopefully benefit from the work that we've been doing.
We now come to the penultimate question. Steve Baker. Steve Baker.
Mr. Speaker, Wickham and Buckinghamshire enjoy a diverse school system, including grammar schools. What consideration has my right honourable friend given to the special situation of those grammar schools?
Secretary of State.
Well, I know this is does present some additional challenges, especially with the consideration of the 11+ in September. And I know that it is a concern of his, and I've actually received representation from Conservative members in Kent about concerns on this. And we're going to be looking at working with local authorities who have who have grammar school systems in their area as to how best we can ensure that children from some children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds are not disadvantaged as they look at taking V11 plus in the future.
We now go over to Slough to Tan Singh Desi. Tan Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we all, including my Slough constituents, want our schools to reopen and for our children's education to continue. But government guidance around the reopening of schools raises more questions than it actually answers. As a parent of 2 young children, I can attest to the fact of how difficult it is to explain social distancing, let alone get the kids to practice it. And that's why so many parents actually fear sending their children to school. So will the Secretary of State revisit the guidance and commit to actually working with education unions and others to create a working plan for reopening our schools when both the science indicates that it's safe to do so and when it has the confidence of all those affected?
Secretary of State.
We will continue to work with the whole sector in terms of making sure that any changes that we have to make or modifications in order to work for children and teachers and schools, we rapidly adopt any changes that are required. But we recognise the importance of creating a safe bubble for children and teachers to operate in. That's why we've put out extensive guidance as how this is done. And this has been done very much working with Public Health England and the scientific community as to how best to approach in the best possible way the return of schools, because children benefit from being in schools and they are losing out as a result of not being in schools.
Right, I will now call the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities, Local Government, Robert Jenrick, who should speak for no more than 10 minutes. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Moving home can be a life-changing moment for many amongst us. For young families spreading their wings after a new arrival, for young people leaving their parents' home for the first time, or for working people changing towns or cities to start a new job. Moving home means planting your roots, laying your foundations. A home is more than 4 walls and a roof. It is a sanctuary, a form of protection, and a link to your community. We know that people's homes are at the heart of their own personal stories, and throughout the course of this emergency, we have, by necessity, put many of those stories on hold to protect our communities and to save lives. When the essential stay-at-home message was announced, we changed the rules so that people could only move home if they thought it was reasonably necessary. For many people, this has put life on hold, with this most relevant and essential industry in a state of suspended animation. There are over 450,000 sales which have been stuck in the system, unable to be progressed. This is not to mention the substantial number of rentals which have not gone ahead. Every month, 300,000 tenancies come up for renewal, a proportion of which result in people moving home. The pressure to move for some has become acute, with profound legal and financial and health implications. We made this decision in order to keep the country safe. But as we move into the next phase of our COVID response and embark on our path to reopen, to restart and to renew the economy, we recognise the need to let people get back to living their lives. Which is why today, Mr. Speaker, I'm announcing a comprehensive, clear and coherent plan to reopen the housing market and to restart the construction industry. With immediate effect, we are lifting the temporary freeze on home moving, meaning that so long as they are not shielding or self-isolating, anyone can move, anytime and for any reason. This industry is broad and has many moving parts, so we want to be clear. Each of the building blocks of the buying and the selling process are now back in business, as long as they can be done safely. So here, Mr. Speaker, is our plan for the reopening, the restarting and the renewing of the housing market and the construction industry. Estate agents' offices are now able to reopen. Removal companies can get moving again. Surveyors, conveyancers and valuers can go back to work, and show homes on sites can reopen. It is crucial that these changes happen safely, and we continue to tread with caution to control the virus and to protect the public. This means that as these businesses reopen, they will need to adapt to new practices. For instance, with virtual viewings where possible, and cleaning thoroughly after viewings and when moving house. I've published detailed guidance, informed by public health advice, to explain how this can be achieved, building on the existing safer working guidance, with all parties observing hygiene measures and social distancing guidelines. For each of the other elements that make up the wider construction industry, a sector that employs over 2 million people, the same applies. If you're self-isolating or have coronavirus, you should, of course, not be moving house or going back to work. All parties involved in home buying and selling should prioritise agreeing amicable arrangements to change move dates for individuals in this group. This, Mr. Speaker, is the most radical restarting of an industry in the first phase of our national recovery roadmap. This was not an easy decision to make. With few, if any, transactions, there is no visibility and no precedent with which to accurately judge the state of the housing market. But I do know that in every economic recovery in modern British history, the housing market has been key. So let me be clear to all who work in the sector, have started a business in it, have invested in it, or rely upon it. I'm doing everything I can to help the industry bounce back. And a healthy housing market means more than buying and selling houses. It requires building them too. But COVID-19 has had a profound impact on house building, with activity on sites down by around 90% since this time last year. I'm delighted to see so many construction companies back at work already, and pleased to be supporting their efforts by today announcing the launch of a safe working charter with the Home Builders Federation. Those working on site should feel confident that their essential jobs are also safe jobs. And I'm also taking further steps to support safe house building by allowing more flexible working hours on construction sites, where appropriate and with local checks and balances. I'm allowing sites to apply to extend their working hours, again with immediate effect. Varied start and finish times will make it much easier for sites to observe social distancing and will take pressure off public transport, particularly in our core cities, and will keep Britain building. The planning system too must be able to operate safely and efficiently during this time, which means, as with many other sectors, making more use of digital technology. I want the Planning Inspectorate to be at the forefront of this work, and it's good to see the Inspectorate now undertaking its first virtual hearings. And I'm also asking them to make all hearings virtual within weeks. We're going to get the planning system going again and bring it into the digital age at the same time. And Mr. Speaker, as we look to the future, we must remember that the prospect of Britain's housing market is key to our economy. When this sector succeeds, we all succeed. And this is what shapes our vision of the housing market: more homes, safer homes, homes of higher quality, more beautiful homes, homes of all types and tenures for all people, rooted in and at the heart of our communities. Today, Mr. Speaker, we reopen, we restart and we renew the housing market and the construction industry to protect lives, save jobs and to refresh and renew our economy. I commend this statement to the House.
I welcome Thangun Debonair to a new job, who has 5 minutes to speak. Up to 5 minutes. Thangun Debonair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance copy of his statement. The government said they would do whatever it takes to get the country through this COVID crisis and protect the most vulnerable. And the opposition, we want the government to succeed. Lives, livelihoods and homes are on the line. In a spirit of constructive cooperation, we scrutinise plans carefully, offer suggestions and challenge when appropriate to try to help bring down the numbers of people infected or tragically dying and to help people manage financially. Sometimes the government has heeded our calls, sometimes not. I'd like them to consider these. Today's announcement provides welcome news for some, and of course we all want new homes building, but it leaves more unanswered housing questions. These urgently need government attention to keep people safe at work and at home, as we don't have community testing, a cure or a vaccine, and there are still problems with PPE. So I asked the Secretary of State, what protection will there be for people renting if a landlord or estate agent wants to show a prospective buyer or new tenant around? What will the government do to help those trapped by the cladding and leasehold scandals at this time? What discussions has the government had with the trade unions? There was no mention in his statement. What advice does the government have for anyone who feels their workplace at construction site is not safe? This crisis has taught us if anyone is struggling, we're all affected. The announcement focused on those who want to move home, but it ignored those who are at risk of being forced. The Secretary of State talked to show homes, but not about people with no homes. And we've shown that when we work together, we can virtually eliminate street homelessness in days. There must be no going back, but people in emergency accommodation face that. Will the government work with councils and homeless organisations about how to provide and pay for a housing first approach so we can end street homelessness for good this year? The Secretary of State says he knows that homes are a sanctuary, but there's no plan for what happens when the temporary ban on eviction ends. We need to prevent people from getting into arrears. So will the government heed Labour's calls to fill the gaps in the financial support schemes? Will he guarantee local housing allowance stays at 30% of market rents? Will he consider raising it further until this crisis eases? People struggling with their rent are worried about what will happen when this ban lifts. And the government says it's working with the Master of the Rolls to widen the existing pre-action protocol on possession proceedings for social landlords to include private renters and to strengthen its remit. But that's not enough. So will he consider Labour's proposal to halt Section 8 evictions on the grounds of arrears caused by the lockdown? Mr. Speaker, in March, ministers said they'd provide whatever funding is needed for councils to get through this and come out the other side. And that's a pledge repeated by the Secretary of State. But this week, he told the Select Committee that councils should not labour under a false impression that all costs would be reimbursed. Which is it? Will the Secretary of State please honour his original commitment to councils? The Minister for Homelessness appeared to require local authorities to accommodate people with no recourse to public funds, but without the funding, which has led to confusion and people being left out. So will the Secretary of State ensure that there is specific funding for housing people with no recourse to public funds? Mr. Speaker, councils cannot borrow for revenue spending. They cannot run deficits. If they can't balance the books, they have to stop spending. And they're currently £10 billion short, a fifth of council spending. They could close every library, leisure centre, children's centre, turn off all the streetlights, lock their gates to parks, and they'd still be billions of pounds short. They would have to make cuts to social care and public health at this time. Will the Secretary of State please ensure that councils are fully recompensed for housing and other costs of this crisis? Finally, Mr. Speaker, during this crisis, we've all become acutely aware of people in overcrowded, unsafe homes, unable to self-isolate, worried about rent, how bad it is for mental and physical health when families have no outside space. The Secretary of State says he wants more homes, safer homes, higher quality, more beautiful homes, but doesn't say how he will ensure that they are higher quality or safe or beautiful. He could have decided to invest in high quality, safe, beautiful, socially owned, zero carbon, truly, truly affordable housing that would capture the national spirit and turn it into really building our future. Instead, the government has focused on private house sales and even today asked councils to allow developers to defer Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy, likely to reduce the numbers of new social and affordable homes. So will the Secretary of State please work with Treasury, housing associations and local authorities and the building industry to invest in high quality, truly affordable social housing? Mr. Speaker, our broken housing system has been brutally exposed. Key workers we applaud each week live in poor housing. They've been left behind too long. We must not go back to business as usual. We must solve the housing crisis for all our heroes, for our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the Honourable Lady to her new role and look forward to working with her constructively in the weeks and months ahead. I'm pleased that she supports the overwhelming direction of our statement today and the importance of the housing industry and construction within this country. She asked a number of questions which I will endeavour to answer as many as I can. With respect to the important question about building safety, well, I have been clear from the onset of this crisis that that work should continue. That was opposed, in fact, by many on the benches opposite, who said it was too risky, but it was the right decision to encourage ACM cladding and other essential building safety works to continue. And I'm pleased to say it is now gradually starting to begin again. And I welcome the mayors coming together, like the Mayor of London and Greater Manchester and Birmingham, to support that in our combined pledge. With respect to rough sleeping, well, I pay tribute to everybody who has been involved in the tremendous national effort so far, bringing 90% of those people who were sleeping rough on our streets at the onset of the crisis into safer accommodation. But now we are in the next phase of that challenge, and I don't underestimate how difficult that will be, protecting those individuals whilst they remain in that accommodation during the lockdown, and then preparing for them to move into more suitable long-term arrangements with the wraparound care that they need and deserve. And that will be a true national effort involving charities, councils and businesses across the country. With respect to renters, well, today's announcement is very much about renters. Every month, 300,000 tenancies come up for renewal, and many of those individuals need to or want to move house. And so today will enable them to do just that and to do it safely, which is the most important consideration. In terms of the guidance that I've published today, it sets out that physical viewings of homes, whether that's for sale or for rent, can go ahead, but those will need to be done in accordance with social distancing guidelines. And in most cases, that will mean that the tenant or the homeowner will not be present in the property. They'll be in the garden or have gone out for their daily exercise. Or if they are in the home for whatever reason, they'll be in a different room, and ensuring that there's 2 meters apart from the individuals who are looking round the property. And that's the right thing to do. With respect to the concern about people being evicted from their properties, well, as she knows, we've changed the law to have a moratorium on evictions so that no possession proceedings can continue, and that will go up until June, at which point I, as Secretary of State, have the ability to extend that if we need to, and we'll be taking that decision very carefully. We'll also be proceeding with the pre-action protocol, working with the Master of the Rolls to ensure that provides an added degree of protection for those individuals. I don't support the Labour proposal, which is to encourage people not to pay rent and to build up potentially unmanageable degrees of debt, so that in 6, 9 months, 12 months' time, their credit rating would be shredded and they'd be in a very difficult financial position. We are developing a much more credible plan to protect renters and to help to shield them through this crisis. Finally, Mr. Speaker, with respect to councils' finances, I said we would stand behind councils and give them funding that they need, and we're doing exactly that. Today, the Prime Minister has announced an extra £600 million, bringing the total investment in our councils to £3.8 billion in just 2 months.
We now go to the Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley. Sir Peter.
The Secretary of State is right to talk about people living their lives. Can I say to him that most of the people going to new homes will be going to leasehold ones? When will he and we act to ban the sale of leasehold and freehold houses? When can he announce actions for justice for leaseholders, lease renters stuck with excessive ground rents? And can he advise residential landlords and smart developers that the financial games are over and the Leasehold Knowledge Campaign and the all-party group are going to make sure there is justice for leaseholders?
To the Father of the House for that question and pay tribute once again to his campaigning over many years against the rip-off practices that we've seen in the leasehold sector. We are committed to bringing an end to those practices, to legislating to bring ground rents down to a peppercorn and to ensure that no new homes are built as leasehold properties except in the most exceptional circumstances, and we're going to be bringing forward draft legislation to be scrutinised on that shortly. I'm pleased that in general those practices have reduced enormously as a result of the government's firm stance and those of campaigners, including many members across the House, and I want to see that continue.
We now go over to the SNP spokesperson, David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement, although I think I read about most of it in the morning papers. I want to focus on the part that he makes in the statement where he says he's announcing a clear, coherent plan, because this is part of the issue that many of us are finding, whether it's in this statement or the statement before on education, because the position in Scotland remains unchanged that people should protect the NHS, stay at home and save lives. And what we're seeing so often with the government is they're announcing these big decisions without actually making clear that it does not apply to people in Scotland. And we in Scotland will take the decision about when to lift the lockdown based on science and when it's right to do so for people. So I would appreciate it if the UK government could be more explicit in making clear that this is for England only. Now, there are elements of this that I am quite puzzled by, particularly about some of the restrictions that are being used, because what we're saying to people is that they can't see both their parents at the same time, but they can welcome two complete strangers into their house. Nor does it make sense to those who are saying that kids can't go out and do a kickabout with their friends in the next garden, but they've got removal men coming into the house and potentially passing a virus about. And that's just two examples of how this doesn't necessarily stack up. And so from a messaging point of view, we've gone from a part on Saturday of saying stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives, to 4 days later saying that you can traipse around anybody, any random stranger's house. So will the Secretary of State take this opportunity to make clear to people at Scotland that the message remains the same, that you should stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives?
Secretary of State.
Well, I've made clear repeatedly in my own statement that this applies to England. The Scottish Government will have to come to their own decision and be held accountable for that. With respect to social distancing, the guidelines are extremely clear, and so I'd be grateful if the honourable gentleman and others didn't purposefully mislead in that respect. Removal men and women and agents and those visiting other people's homes need to respect the social distancing guidelines. That means staying 2 metres apart. That means using protective equipment as we've set out in the guidance where it's appropriate. And for those residents of the properties, it means either being out of the home at the time of the viewing, in the garden or in another room, so that you don't come into contact with those visiting the property. And that's been fully signed off by Public Health England and all the medical and scientific experts.
Theo Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friends for today's welcome housing announcement that estate agents in Stafford can now reopen and viewings can resume, as many of my constituents were in the house buying process when COVID-19 hit, and will very much welcome this certainty. But can I ask him what steps will be taken to ensure that my constituents can undertake viewing safely, and how estate agents can ensure that they are in line with this new government guidance?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that question. I'm sure in Stafford, as across the country, there will be thousands of people who are in a state of limbo, not being able to move home. And this announcement today will make a big difference to their lives, as well as to the local economy in Staffordshire. With respect to the guidelines, they're clear, as I've already said, that you need to respect social distancing guidelines when you're in other people's properties. We're encouraging virtual viewings, which can be the more sophisticated ones, but they come at a cost, or it could be as simple as the agent or the homeowner producing a video on their smartphone and making that available to anybody who's interested in the property before they come and visit. And with respect to show homes, we're strongly encouraging people to do so by appointment only, to avoid speculative visits which aren't necessary.
We go to the Chair of the Select Committee over in Sheffield, Clive Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I welcome much of what the government has proposed, the help particularly for private tenants, but we should recognise that the rent arrears of many tenants will grow over time, causing problems not merely for them, but for small private landlords as well. So would the Secretary of State consider the Spanish government's scheme of giving low interest loans to tenants to help both them pay the rent and the landlords to receive them? And in terms of the new housing market, if demand falls for new homes, will you consider increasing grants to housing associations and councils so that they can actually help the construction industry keep going by building more social homes for rent?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, with respect to supporting the industry, I think it's too soon today to judge with confidence the state of the housing market because there have been so few transactions in recent weeks. But we stand ready to work with the industry and to help to guide them through undoubtedly an extremely challenging period. We've announced some measures today, for example, enabling councils to defer SIL and Section 106 payments, which does not mean that there's an impact in the longer term upon social infrastructure or affordable homes, but it does mean that SME builders in particular can have a bit of breathing space in the weeks and months ahead, which is absolutely critical and is a lesson learnt from the last downturn in the market. With respect to the question around renters, well, we're thinking very carefully about what more we can do to protect them. Of course, there are other government schemes like the Furlough scheme, which is now paying a proportion of millions of working people's wages and helping to support them through this difficult period. The moratorium on evictions prevents possession proceedings proceeding at court at the present time, but we'll need to think carefully about what to do when that comes to an end in June.
We go over to Peter Gibson. Peter Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend knows that the construction industry is core to our economy's success. Could he outline what steps the government are taking to ensure this important sector has the flexibility it needs to operate safely and restart?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, across the country, millions of people are employed in the construction industry. It's absolutely essential we get them back to work, but we have to do so safely. Today's charter, working with the house builders, will set out ways in which we believe that can be done, and many of the country's house builders have been working with us in recent weeks to put in place the protocols and the site working practices that will be needed to protect those working people. Today's written ministerial statement that I've lain extending the working hours of sites will also play its part, because that will enable sites to stay open during the summer months, potentially to 9 p.m. at night in residential areas, and longer than that in areas where there are no neighbouring properties, to help the industry to catch up if they want to, but above all to help them to put in place the social distancing rules that they'll need to operate sites safely and to reduce pressure on public transport. And I hope all of us across the country and our councils will support that and make sure it's implemented smoothly.
Go over to Catherine West. Catherine West.
Mr. Speaker, could I press the Secretary of State on the cliff edge facing many in the privately rented sector? What action will the government take to avoid mass homelessness as the moratorium on evictions lifts and we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as I've already said, we've legislated to have a moratorium on evictions, which comes up for review in June. At that point, the Secretary of State has the power to extend it. If necessary, we'll take that judgment at the time on the basis of the market, the evidence we see is in respect of how many individuals might be coming before courts with eviction proceedings, and consider what further steps might be necessary at the time.
Go over to Robert Coates in Oxfordshire. Robert Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. To provide the reassurance and the clarity that my constituents in West Oxfordshire would like, could he confirm that whilst people can move whenever they like and that removal firms are able to help, the government does still ask and require that that is carried out safely?
Well, it's extremely important that removal firms across the country, many of which are small and medium-sized businesses, get back to work, and so we have worked with them to produce guidelines which we believe will enable them to do so safely. And there may be more work that we do in the weeks and months ahead to learn from that, but they play an absolutely critical role in the industry.
Go over to Alex Norris. Alex Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Secretary of State, at the beginning of this crisis, you said everybody in and that you would fund councils to end homelessness. Since then, it's been suggested that this might not apply to those with no recourse for public funds. This is nonsense. Of course, the virus couldn't care less about someone's migration status. So, Secretary of State, will you take the opportunity today to clarify that when you said everybody, you meant absolutely everybody, and that you would be providing the funding to make sure this happened?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm extremely grateful for the work of local councils and charities in places like Nottingham, who do an amazing job at bringing at least 90% of those individuals who were sleeping rough at the onset of the crisis into safer accommodation. In some parts of the country, the numbers of rough sleepers have now fallen to as low as 1 or 2 or 3 individuals. We believe it could even be as much as a 98% success rate so far. But the challenge is by no means complete. There's more work to do. We've said that the government's policy on no recourse to public funds has not changed, but councils do have flexibility, as they know, to support those individuals where there's a risk to life and serious concern. They should behave humanely and compassionately.
We now go over to Dr. James Davies. Dr. James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement, and I would ask my right honourable friend what advice the new guidance offers for those following Chief Medical Officer advice to shield in their home.
Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend raised a very important point that we can't emphasise enough today. There will be individuals who are not advised to move home, except in the most unusual circumstances. Those people who we've asked to shield, those people who have extremely high levels of vulnerability to the virus, as identified by the Chief Medical Officer, should continue to do so, stay at home, have as little face-to-face contact as possible, and now would not be the right time for them to move house. If they absolutely have to, they should take medical advice before doing so.
We head to north of the border with Miriam Fellows. Miriam Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, I saw the Secretary of State's social media posts on this easing of instructions, and every comment and reply I saw from members of the public highlighted contradictions and inconsistencies. This, plus the shocking YouGov poll, which found that only 30% of respondents believed the UK government's instructions to stay alert were clear, this suggests that this government has a major problem with communication. Does the Secretary of State think that this government's recent communications with the public have been clear, and will he yet again confirm that this easing only applies in England?
Secretary of State.
Well, this is one of the most comprehensive, coherent and clear plans for any sectors of the economy. We have worked with every part of the industry, from the removal companies, the estate agents, the letting agents, the surveyors, the conveyancers, the builders, you name it, to put in place the guidance that is needed, all published today on gov.uk, and it's been hugely welcomed by people across the industry and the millions of people in England who want to move house and get on with their lives, as well as the 2.3 million people whose jobs depend on this critical industry.
A final question from Steve Brine. Steve Brine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend is dead right to say in his statement that we need to build homes as well as before we can buy and sell them. So what can he do to unlock the market in Hampshire, where a standoff between Natural England and local authorities over nitrates in the Solent, a subject I know he knows about, has tied planners, developers, architects and investors in knots long before COVID-19 hit us, and perversely is encouraging greenfield development over brownfield?
Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend and I have discussed this at length on a number of occasions, and he has been very assiduous in campaigning to break this deadlock. It is extremely unfortunate that before the present coronavirus crisis, house building within the Solent was essentially paused because of this issue. I have been working with the Department for the Environment and with Natural England to bring forward guidelines and to bring the parties together, because too many people's livelihoods depend on this, and we need to move this forward. I hope that those guidelines are now available. I will ensure that we continue to work with his local council and others to get the industry moving in the Solent.
That's all for now, folks, so I will suspend the House for 15 minutes until 1:53.